My dear students, today we shall discuss theme 2 titled Writing and City Life, and today we shall discuss part 2 of it. In our previous class, we started discussing this particular theme, that is the theme 2, and while discussing we made reference to the city of Mesopotamia, which is accepted as the first city in the world history, or the beginning of that marked the beginning of the city life in the world. And in that connection, we made the discussion on the location of Mesopotamia, which is situated in Iraq, and also its geography and the influence of geography over the development of history or the development of city life in Mesopotamia. So we shall continue the discussion on Mesopotamia in our today's lecture, that is in part 2. So today we shall make the discussion first of all on the movements of goods into cities. Before we go to the main points, I like to refer to my previous lecture where I had discussed on the development of trade in Mesopotamia, and also I discussed how Mesopotamia was rich in food supply as well as in the supply of the products which were received from the animal husbandry industry. So Mesopotamia was rich in the food supply as well as the articles which we received from the animal husbandry. Mesopotamia was rich in food supply, but not in some other respects, for example, mineral resources, precious stones, shell, and the availability of wood. So in Mesopotamia, although food supply was immense, there were enough material from animal husbandry, for example, meat, milk-made product or wool, but regarding the other respects, for example, mineral resources, precious stones that were used in various other purposes, and shell, and in respect of the availability of the wood, Mesopotamia was not self-sufficient. Stones were needed for making tools and seals. Precious stones were used in ornaments, which were made of valuable metals like gold and silver. Ornaments were made of shells also. Metals like copper, tin, etc. were used for other purposes, for example, making utensils. Wood was needed to make carts and boats. But these goods, for example, the mineral resources, precious stones, shells, wood, all were needed in the life of Mesopotamia. Precious stones were used in ornaments. Ornaments were made in gold and silver. These were the metals. And ornaments were made with shells also. And metals like copper, tin, etc. were used in Mesopotamian life for making utensils as well as some other tools. Wood was also needed because the Mesopotamian carts and boats were made of wood. But all these items were not found in Mesopotamia or produced in Mesopotamia itself. All the above items were not available in Mesopotamia. These were imported from the neighboring countries like Iran, Turkey, and even from the places across the Persian Gulf. Probably Mesopotamia traded her abundant textile and agricultural products for wood, copper, tin, silver, gold, shell, and various stones from the countries like Iran, Turkey, or countries across the Persian Gulf. Now, Mesopotamian people, they used to trade. They used to exchange their abundant textile, mainly wool, which were produced from the animal husbandry, and agricultural products which were abundant in Mesopotamia for wood, copper, tin, silver, gold, shell, etc. from the neighboring countries like Iran, Turkey, or countries across the Persian Gulf, where the food production was less and the animal products were also less. They used to sell their goods with them, and the medium was the agricultural products and the textile goods. Naturally, there existed movements of goods from one place to another place, which developed a regular transport and communication system. Efficient transport is also an important aspect of urban life. So when there existed a trade, naturally it was needed that the goods used to move from one place to another. The textile goods or agricultural products used to go from Mesopotamia to the foreign countries like Iran, Turkey, etc. And from these countries, there came the minerals like copper, tin, silver, gold, etc., shells and precious stones. So naturally, a regular transport and communication was needed from Mesopotamia to foreign countries and from foreign countries to Mesopotamia. There were both land routes and waterways. Now, in both land routes and waterways, the transport was being made. In the land routes, goods were carried by the bullock carts, but it involved huge expenses as the animals that drew the carts were needed to fed regularly on their way to destination. In the land route, the goods were carried by bullock carts, but the bullocks needed to fed regularly, because without feeding, no one can make them to carry goods from one place to another place. So it was an expensive way of transport. Waterways were the cheapest mode of transport, and goods were being carried on by boats made of wood, propelled by current or of river or wind. But the other way, that is the waterway, it was the cheapest mode of transport, because very little expense was involved in it. Boats were made of wood, and boats were propelled by the current of river or by wind, and naturally it through the natural force it reached to the destination easily without involving any huge expense. Development of writing. Another important point to be discussed is the development of writing. All societies had some language in which certain spoken sounds convey certain meanings. At first, languages develops in all societies through certain spoken sounds which convey some meanings. When these spoken sounds were represented in visible signs, writing developed. When the spoken sounds were made visible on paper like something through some signs, then the writing developed. Writing developed in Mesopotamia around 3200 BCE, probably for the first time in the southern cities like Uruk. When the society needed to keep records of transactions, for example, the list of goods that were brought into and distributed among the people, etc., they developed writing. So, what for the people started to write? The society in the cities where a large number of people lived together, they needed some transaction of goods. Some goods were brought into the cities from villages. So, a record was needed to be kept. These goods, for example, the food grains, needed to be distributed among the people living in the cities. That also needed some record maintenance. For maintaining these records of transactions, at first the writing developed. Such records were kept usually in the temples, which were the centers of all social activities. And who kept those records in written form? The temples. Temples were the centers of all social activities, and this particular point will be discussed in my next lecture. Such writings contained picture-like signs, and these were pictographic. At first, the type of writing which developed is called pictographic writing because the writing, these were some signs or symbols and they were the picture-like symbols. In these writings, letters were cuneiform. The word cuneiform is derived from the Latin words cuneus, meaning wedge, and forma, meaning shape. Wedge shape writing, this is called the cuneiform writing. Mesopotamians wrote on clay tablets. They did not know the use of paper. Paper at first was invented in China. And the Mesopotamians, they did not know the making or using of paper. They started to write on clay tablets. With clay, the thick plates were made, making their surface smooth. They used to make thick plates with clay, and the surface of the plates were very smooth. When the clay-made tablets remained soft, at first when the tablets were made with clay, they were soft. Before being dried up, the writers used to write with a sharp reed cut obliquely. He could press wedge-shaped cuneiform signs on the smooth surface of the tablet. When the clay tablets were soft, before being dried up, the writers used to write with a sharp pen-like material, and by pressing this pen-like sharp material, they used to write cuneiform signs on the smooth surface of the tablets. Then the tablet was dried up by putting in sunlight to make it hard. Then they kept the tablet in sunlight, and in sunlight it became dried up and it became hard and a permanent piece of writing. These writings, once written, became permanent and were thrown away after use. Thus, Hundreds of clay tablets were found in Mesopotamian sites. Once it is used and its relevance, there existed no relevance of it, it became outdated, they used to throw it, and in this way, hundreds of clay tablets are found in the Mesopotamian sites. By 2600 BC, the letters were cuneiform and the language was Sumerian. Around 2400 BC, the Akkadian language, which was also cuneiform in nature, replaced the Sumerian language. That I had discussed in my part 1 lecture. And the Akkadian language had been continued for 2000 years until the 1st century BC. Written clay tablets were made for various purposes. For example, to keep records of transaction of goods, making dictionaries. With clay tablets, they made the dictionaries, the meaning of the signs or symbols they made. Giving legal validity of land transfers. When the land was sold from one person to another, to give it the legal validity, they used to make the clay tablets. To keep records of king's great deeds. The king had done something great, so they used to keep record of this on the clay tablets. And to change the customary laws. Some change had come in the laws of the city. So in order to make the legal record of the change, they used to write it down on the clay tablets. In this way, for various purposes, the clay tablets were made. System of writing and literacy. There were a few people in the city who used to scribe. Don't think that all the children in the city, they were sent to school like the modern age to learn reading and writing. It was not like that. There existed no school. There were very few people in the city who used to scribe. Writing was a skilled and highly intellectual activity because the writers had to write within a short time, so long the clay tablets remain soft before they get dried up. The writers, they had to write within a very short span of time. So long the clay tablets remain soft, they could write before they get dried up. After being dried up, nobody can write on a clay tablet. It will become hard. There existed no specific syllables, and they had to visualize hundreds of signs to convey the messages of the spoken language. And one more important thing is that there existed no specific syllables. In English, we have 26 syllables from A to Z. And with these 26 syllables, we used to write the language. Whatever we want to write, we can write with these 26 syllables. But these Mesopotamian writings, they had no such specific syllables. They had some signs or symbols, hundreds in number. And all these signs and syllables were learned by the writers. And with those hundreds of signs and syllables, the messages of the spoken language were made to convey the messages. Very few Mesopotamians therefore knew to write because they needed to learn hundreds of signs which were complex in characters. Those signs were also not so easy. They were very much complex in character. Most of the kings did not know how to write. Even the kings also did not know how to write. There were a particular group, professional group, who were known as the scribe or the writers. So here in this picture, we can see some of the Mesopotamian writings. In image 1, we may see the cuneiform syllabic signs. You see image 1, see how they had scribed the signs on the clay tablets, and it is the cuneiform writing. In image 2, there are the pictographic or picture like signs of 3200 BC. It is written here, grain, fish. You can make out from the picture that what they wanted to say. Image 3, this is the picture of a clay tablet which is having the cuneiform writing. Picture 4 is also another clay tablet with cuneiform writing. So these are some of the examples of writings in Mesopotamia. Uses of writing. The connection among city life, trade and writing is revealed through a long Sumerian epic written on end marker, one of the earliest kings of the city of Uruk. Now, how a city life, trade and the art of writing is connected to each other, it is revealed through a long Sumerian epic written on end marker. He was one of the earliest kings of the city of Uruk. In this epic written on end marker, a story is written. From that story, we can get the idea how the city life, the trade by the people of the cities and the art of writing was connected to each other. Enmarker wanted, he was the king of Uruk, he wanted to beautify the city temple of Uruk. And for that reason, he wanted to bring a precious stone named lapis lazuli and silver from the neighboring kingdom of Aratta. He wanted to beautify the city temple of Uruk, and for that reason he wanted to beautify it with a very beautiful stone, precious stone named lapis lazuli, and also with silver, which was not available in Mesopotamia, and he wanted to buy it from the neighboring kingdom of Aratta. A messenger was sent with this message to the king of Aratta. So he sent a messenger to the king of Aratta with this message that he wanted to buy some lapis lazuli and silver. He went again and again after crossing a long way to Aratta and came back to Uruk. The messenger, he went again and again after crossing a long way, crossing rivers, mountains, etc. He reached Aratta and he tried to explain the message of the king of Uruk and Marka to the king of Aratta, but he failed every time and he came back to Uruk again, but could not make the king of Aratta to understand the message of King Enmarkar. The king of Aratta, he did not understand what message was given by King Enmarkar to him. The messenger failed to explain it by his language. Finally, the message was written on a clay tablet with the cuneiform writing, and the king of Aratta became surprised and for the first time experienced a written message related to trade. Finally, when Enmarkar found that the messenger had failed repeatedly to explain the matter to the king of Aratta, then he had written it down on a clay tablet. On behalf of him, the writers had written down the message on a clay tablet with the cuneiform writing, and the king of Aratta got this clay tablet from Enmarker through the messenger. And the king of Aratta became surprised because he had not seen such a written message on a clay tablet, and for the first time experienced a written message related to trade. In this way, the written exchange of written message developed in relation to trade among the various countries. Each and every aspect of the story as revealed in the epic need not be believed. It is a story written in the epic form, and we need not believe all the aspects of the story. If you go through the story in your book, you can get it from page 34 to 35 to 36 in details, and you will get the detailed stories written how the messengers crossed several miles and an way. But we need not believe the entire story, but it marks the superiority of the Mesopotamian culture over the others. But we get this information from the story that the Mesopotamian had developed a superior culture over the others. They had introduced the system of writing to the world and the system of exchanging the written records between one country to another country. Gradually, the writings and scripts were adopted by the other neighboring countries. The Mesopotamian writings and scripts were adopted gradually by the other neighboring countries like Turkey, Egypt, and the countries across the Persian Gulf. So this much for today. Thank you.